the same in US, also in Israel. They preach for a high carb diet. Usually they will say also for children even to consume more carbs because they believe it has something to do with growth. I don't know what. The endocrinologist today, I'm not really in contact with endocrinologist. I don't know if it sounds good or not, but I take care of myself if there is a blood test that I'm doing. So I have like a functional doctor that is like looking at my tests, maybe sending me to some special values, but not more than that. I don't need any help in the everyday balance, you know.
Okay, good morning, everybody. We have a special guest today, Tomer Pappe. Where are you from, Tomer?
I'm from Israel.
You're from Israel. Okay, very good. How are things going there today?
Really good. It's now evening time, so for me, it's the end of the day. For you, it's the beginning.
Good evening. Have you lived in Israel your whole life?
Yeah, I had times in Australia and in Europe, a bit in Germany, but yeah, I'm Israeli, born and raised.
Okay, well, just for the folks that aren't familiar with you, just go ahead and give us a little bit about your background, who you are, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, actually, we had a meeting 2 years ago.
Yeah, I remember, but I think, I don't know if anybody else knows who you are right now.
Yeah, so I'm type 1 diabetic, and I balanced it through diet and especially low carb diet. And I saw actually that you had Richard Dykman, which I'm very familiar with from the groups.
Yeah.
So I will try to give your audience a new perspective from my personal angle.
Okay.
At the age of 11, I got type 1 diabetes. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And I went through the normal journey of the doctors telling me, okay, you can eat whatever you want and just remember to put the numbers in the insulin pump. And as a good boy, that's what I was doing. And eventually, you can say that only 15 years later, at the age of 26, I had a really bad experience, and I had diabetes ketoacidosis. And there, what I felt was that I lost completely control over my body, and especially my blood glucose, which then I didn't know how significant effect it has on my entire life and my entire health aspects. But there I decided that I should do anything it takes. It doesn't matter what will happen, but I will get control back over this complex problem, and I will find a solution. And at that time, I started only reading. I think I was like 6 months at home, just reading and exploring, and everywhere popped up the name Dr. Bernstein. In Hebrew, we say Dr. Bernstein. He's Jewish. I was happy that finally there is a system that someone is giving me. It was like a guide for the balancer. I don't know what to call it, but there was just a system that I could saw, and it was very straightforward. There wasn't. He's talking straight to the point, and I started to do it, and I saw that everything that he say in the book is actually true, and my blood sugar was. It was the first time in my life that I got below 6. That we will talk about it probably, A1C levels, and ever since I never stopped exploring. And actually, this finding that food is so significant on my life, and especially when I started, to experience with low carb diets, it was so exciting for me that I decided to make it a profession. And I assigned to the clinical nutritionist in Israel to the studies. It's a 4-year studies, and soon I'm finishing. I'm now 31. That's what excites me the most, that I can pass that knowledge, to other diabetics, to other type 1s, that they were in the same point. They're in the same point that I was. That's, I think, the most important thing.
Yes, you've been a type 1 diabetic now for now 20 years. It sounds like, from 11 to 30, and we see that type 1 diabetes is actually increasing in prevalence. It's still type 2 by and large is a majority of diabetics, but even among the type 1s, we see more and more people acquiring type 1 diabetes. It used to be considered juvenile diabetes, but now we're seeing even older adults starting to develop type 1 diabetes. And so, any insight onto causality, at least in your case? Was there some kind of event and infection? Sometimes some people believe it might be a viral trigger. Any thoughts on that for you? Or just, we don't know?
Today, the science will say that it's unknown, but In my case, there wasn't any special event in my life, not a mental event, not a close relative that passed away, or nothing. But I know some cases. We have in Israel a very famous case that in the Second Lebanon War in 2006, there was almost an entire class of soldiers. They were were reserve soldiers, so they were 30 years plus, and they all got 90% of them got type 1 diabetes in the year that is after the war, and that was sure that in their case it was mental. But for me personally, there was nothing in my personal life. What I think that it sits down, like, as you know, the doctors would say genetics, but I think there is like environmental things that they put the ground for autoimmune issues. And if you ask me, it has to do with always with vitamin D, because vitamin D is always related to autoimmune issues. Low vitamin D with some extra effect of some toxins, and might be even in infancy when a synthetic mother milk. It's only it's my take.
Yeah. So when let's go back to when you were diagnosed. You were diagnosed in Israel, and what was it? Did they have you any kind of dietary strategies? Was it typical to eat whatever you want and just cover with a bunch of insulin? Was that the strategy that you were given?
Yeah, the doctors, they always said like in Israel we're a bit imitating the US, so it was kind of the same. Maybe we're a bit back behind you in the treatment, but it was more or less the same. The doctors were telling me, just eat whatever you want. You are a normal kid. And for my parents, they were worried that I will be different. So that was the strategy. Just eat whatever you like. Eat also the cookies and everything. Just remember, never forget to inject.
Yeah. And particularly for kids, they say, well, kids, it's too hard to control kids' diets, so you just tell them to go ahead and not worry about it, which I think is kind of bad advice, because a lot of kids you can have an impact on what a kid eats. I do. My kids eat. I'm very significant influence on what my kids eat. You said 26, you got DKA. So for people that don't know what DKA is, can you explain a little bit what happens and what was going on for you and how you noticed that?
It's generally caused by when you don't give any attention for your blood glucose. And back in those days, I weren't in any nutritional strategy that I had. It was just, as you said, I ate everything and just injected on it. And in that particular day, I had some mechanical problem. And now I know retrospective that I didn't had enough insulin. So my glucose was rising very quite slowly, but over a long period of time. Like it was like 2 days almost. And then I could see that I'm reaching 300 and 400, but something weird was happening, that I was injecting insulin and my body wasn't reacting. Like the insulin wasn't affecting also from injections. And then I realized that my body got into a whole different story now. It was like a severe dehydration. And you never know exactly if the DKA caused it or the dehydration. But if you say like in the clinical aspect, so diabetes ketoacidosis is when the body starts producing too many ketones, and there is no regulation over the ketones, and then it becomes toxic in the blood.
Yeah, I was going to say it's almost always in conjunction with super high glucose. So there is, with some drugs, you can have this euglycemic DKA. This is something that the SGLT2 inhibitors have been known for. But so you have the super high glucose. So the insulin you had was bad or something like that. Sometimes insulin will go bad, or you said, were you on a pump at that time? Maybe the pump was malfunctioning.
Yeah, so then it was before I was doing all the changes in my life. So I was on the pump, and the pump has a lot of downsides, and that's one of them. That it's you put your life on a machine, basically. And there, I think it was like an infusion set issue. Just, it was really technical, if I was a bit more into it, so it would probably all could prevent it. But in that case, in those days, I weren't. And then just 1 day and a half, and that's it. And I was in the hospital and in the ER, and they had to inject me insulin into the vein. But that's the thing, like people, I work a lot with diabetics today, daily, and a lot of them, they confused about the difference between DKA, diabetes ketoacidosis, and ketones in the blood, and that they are from diet.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of people don't understand the difference between what's called nutritional ketosis versus DK. Even a lot of physicians, which is really kind of sad to see that.
Yeah.
When you went into
They can warn you from that, like, that beware of DKA, but it's a completely different mechanism. Like,
right. It's like if you said, well, I have my blood, it's like saying, well, my blood glucose is 100 milligrams per deciliter and 500 milligrams. They're different. They're totally different situations. It's like, well, no, you need some glucose, right? When you went into DKA, I mean, I assume you were under the care of an endocrinologist, seeing them, a couple times a year, probably, as many type 1 diabetics do. Was there any thought about, hey, what's going on here? Do we need to change things? Or did the physicians have any insight when you went into DKA?
No, I was pretty much in the hands of ER kind of physicians, and they were doing the job really good. But the thing is, that I was laying there in the hospital, and I remember the monitors in front of me, and I felt like I have to take control over that. And there was any advice from any of them. Like, I'm not talking even about, low carb and the Bernstein solution. I'm talking about things way simpler than that. No one talked to me about it. The attitude was kind of like, look, that's part of diabetes. Like, what can you do? We're going to stabilize you and go back to your life, like, carry on.
And when you were 26, what were you doing career-wise? Were you a medical person, or what was your background in?
No, I was in a completely different track. When I was 20, I got certificated as a personal trainer. And in those years, I was being like the mainstream, personal trainer that tells you, look, you should eat a lot of carbs. And as a diabetic, I was doing that also. Like, you should base your workout regimen on carbs, and that's how it goes. And the body needs carbs in order to build muscle, and all of those cliches. And on 26, I was in that point. I never thought that I will, talk to you this moment, and that will be my profession, a nutritionist. It was more like I just wanted to be a trainer in order to look good, or to build me muscles, which today I don't put a lot of attention to that. It's like I'm more excited from the things that really balance your body. And it was a completely different track. If I wouldn't change it, I would probably be today some kind of a personal trainer or a bartender in Tel Aviv.
Okay, so 26, when you went through DK, was this kind of like the straw that broke the back and said, I got to change something? Was that right then in that moment you decide I've got to do something on my own because I'm not getting help from the medical community?
Absolutely. Yeah. In the ER, it's only 2 nights we are talking about, but they were life-changing for me, because it was like a slap in the face. Like, if you won't do it now, it's like I was in a crossroads, and that's where I had to do it. And you know what happened also in the hospital in exactly the same time? I saw that many around me, they are type 2 diabetics in their 60 plus years life, and they all had complications. And that was the real, like, it really sealed the deal for me that I have to do something. And one of them, actually, I know his wife, and he passed away one week later of my ER experience. And he got his legs cut off. It was a serious thing for me. Also, the DKA plus all these type 2 diabetics that they all of them, they all have in common is that they were all unbalanced through all of their lives. And only then I decided it. It was like a one time, like in the movies, one moment that I decided it in ER. And ever since, I never stopped exploring.
Okay, so tell us about how that evolved then. So you're 26. You said, I'm fed up with this stuff. I'm going to take control of my life somehow. How did that go? How did you learn about things, and where did you start?
Yeah, so a personal trainer or bartender. Yeah, it's true. That was the route back then. When I started exploring it, just like all of us do today, I just went to Dr. Google, and there I just saw some correlation between all of my results. That the name Dr. Bernstein is kind of like, he comes as the father of diabetes not only nutrition, but he took part in inventing the home glucometer that we use today, like the Freestyle Light and all of them. So I crossed a lot of information, and I said, okay, this person, Bernstein, I have no idea who is he, but I have to read his book. I have to find something deeper. And then when I saw this guide, it's actually a big book. It's 600, I think, pages in English, which my English is quite good, but still it's it's a semi-scientific English. Only then I realized that you can take control over this disease, and everything that I've been told for 16 years back, 16 years till then is not true. It's not that complications, they are not like something that you have to suffer from. There is nothing in this disease that you can't control. Maybe as a type 1 diabetic, you will have to inject insulin. We will both agree. You are a doctor, you will know, but beside that, I can control the root of my life, and it's my health destination. I can live to an old age and to be still to be still active, or I can be or I can rely on the health on the health insurance in Israel or whatever, and just to be dependent. And much more than that, I felt it in everyday symptoms. And then when I made the change, I saw that all of them went away, like my concentration, my energy levels through the day. It was amazing to me that I can work for 12 hours and 14 hours as I can be a student and work at the same time, and I'm not getting tired. And before that, I was just tired all the time. And I remember my mother told me when I was young that when I was 22, maybe she told me, Tomer, maybe you are kind of a tired person. And I thought maybe it's my personality. But when I realized, no, it's 95% nutrition. The rest is like maybe the dosing, but that's really technical. So you can say 100% nutrition. And ever since I never stopped exploring it. I'm not so strict now about Bernstein. Like I develop it all the time. And the law for me is just keep your numbers in range.
Yeah. And so you went into DKA. So obviously blood glucose, 300, 400, 500, milligrams per deciliter, whatever it was. And you said you'd never been below 6 before. So what were your hemoglobin A1Cs running prior to making the switch? And what are they typically these days?
Back when I was diagnosed, they reached very high. I think my highest was 12 when I was probably 12 also. Since then, it was like around 8 in my adolescence. And I have some anecdotes that show you very well the change that I've done in my body. But you can say that it was 12 and then it was around 8. And only when I started to add workouts, it was around when I was 20, I was starting like falling in love with all the sports, working out world. And then it went down a bit. You can say around 6.4 until I was 26. And ever since I started, to completely control it. So it rapidly went down from 6.4. Then the next one was 5.8, and it was only temporarily. And then it was like 5.2, and then 4.9. And ever since, like I'm between 4.9. If I'm going up to 5.1, it's fine for me also. I'm not afraid of that.
So averaging around 5. So that's completely normal hemoglobin A1C. And not many diabetics ever achieve that, particularly, and even the goals. I mean, if you look at the goals that the United States, I guess, American Diabetes Association, their goal is just keeping it under 7, which, I mean, you're still setting you up for significant potential for damage, whether it's retinopathy, nephropathy, vascular disease, weight gain, all those things are associated with that. So dementia, not to mention. So during the time, I mean, I don't know how it is in Israel, but in the United States, if you're on insulin, you're almost undoubtedly utilizing a physician to get that insulin. Although there's some people that can buy insulin over the counter at a place like Walmart here in the U.S. But are you still engaged with an endocrinologist, and are they supportive of your dietary habits?
Yeah, it's a good question. In Israel, actually, we have it's a social, more socialized care. Mm-hmm. So there's you don't have those stories that someone can't afford insulin because it's every diabetic can get it. So I get it anyway, but as a law in Israel. But my endocrinologist, actually, I have an endocrinologist that he is a low carber also, and he also read Dr. Bernstein's book, and he's amazing. And he's not telling you to be on 5, but he say like 5.5 to 5. That's good, and it's still good comparing to the rest, to the mainstream endocrinologists. That the same in US, also in Israel, they preach for a high carb diet. Usually they will say also for children even to consume more carbs because they believe it has something to do with growth. I don't know what. The endocrinologist today, I'm not really in contact with endocrinologist. I don't know if it sounds good or not, but I take care of myself if there is a blood test that I'm doing. So I have like a functional doctor that is like looking at my tests, maybe sending me to some special values, but not more than that. I don't need any help in the everyday balance, you know.
Yeah, and most diabetics, to be honest, are have to manage it themselves, type 1s, because they can't be in the doctor's office every day. So they're once every 3 to 6 months or something like that. So you have to manage it yourself in a large way. I don't know. Maybe I'm sure you maybe know the stats. It used to be the life expectancy for type 1 diabetics was quite low. You're probably at minimum losing 10 years off your life expectancy. Is that still the case for type 1 diabetes today? I haven't looked at the stats. It used to be like a death sentence. It was like back in the before insulin, it was like you live 3 or 4 years and you're dead. Now with insulin, they prolong that. So certainly it's helped people, but even still, due to the high rates of, these effects of hyperglycemia, whether it's heart disease or renal failure, things like that, blindness, amputations. I know Bernstein is a huge proponent of, being very aggressive about maintaining normal glycemia or glycemic control to avoid those things. So are you assessing, your kidney function and your retinal health and those types of things from time to time?
Yeah, I'm looking at them like, I know that if I'm in range, so I have nothing to worry about, the same way as you and your listeners don't have to check their eyes all the time if they are balanced. So that's my way of work with that disease. But I do the normal checks maybe once a year. Even I can do it every once in 2 years, just for the doctor not to call me anymore or something like that. But it's not. I don't feel there is anything special for me to check. But I know, the life expectancy. I think we're in the same situation as we were like 10 years ago. If I don't know exactly the numbers, but I don't think anything changed.
Yeah, I would not. In fact, it's probably gotten worse, to be honest. It's because diet has gotten progressively worse over the last 20, 30 years. So it's probably even worse now in many cases. So I know I've talked to a number of type 1 diabetics now, and they find that the insulin regimen becomes a little different because when you're on obviously a carbohydrate-based diet, you have this very rapid onset of glycemic, excursions, right after you eat the meat, right after you eat something particularly rapidly, absorbable carbohydrate like a simple sugar. I mean, it goes through the roof very quickly, and then you have to dose, chase it, or catch it, or hopefully you can time the curve. And so there's these ultra rapid acting insulins that many people are using, the things like Humalog and things like that, which were developed for that very reason. But a lot of people on sort of a Bernstein method, or particularly if they're eating things like a lot of meat, and I've seen a lot of people in a carnivore diet doing type 1 diabetics now, and that rise is very much delayed and much slower and more gentle of a curve. Are you using more regular insulin, or are you using the ultra rapid acting type stuff?
Yeah, that was a big change for me, that I've realized that there is actually insulin that is, as you said, it was developed to the standard American diet, that you eat a lot of carbs, and that's usually the Novorapid, Novolog, or Humalog. You have today even a more rapid insulins, but that's also something that's no one ever told me before, that you have to adjust the insulin when you eat protein and fat. And Bernstein loved to talk about it also, and he showed the graphs really well, that you can never chase processed sugar, processed rapid acting sugar with fast acting insulin. No matter even if you are the best in the world in doing that, you have a lot of insulin that is not being absorbed, and some of that the immune system might destroy, and you have a lot of reasons why it will never work. Even if you eat exactly the same amount of carbohydrates every day, you can't do it without a pancreas. Not also today with the technology that you have with as they call it, artificial pancreas. So yeah, if you want to go safe, just you eat a lot of meat. That's what I do today. Actually, I eat a lot of red meat with some maybe some low carb fruits and some milk products like as a adding, but it's just easy. Yeah, and I inject regular, and it's almost every meal the same. And even if I'm mistaken by 1/4 of a unit or a half a unit, so it's okay. I went up to 110. I can correct it very easily.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I mean a lot of type 1 diabetics do. I mean, particularly that are very meticulous about managing their diet becomes very similar. Like most days, eat kind of the same stuff because it's more predictable for them. Do you ever get like where things don't happen as you expect them to? I mean, how much randomness do you run into? Is it like one day it's like, wow, it's up for some reason, I don't know why, I'm eating the same thing I ate yesterday? How often does that happen to you, or does it happen to you?
Yeah, it happens. We are all humans. I'm only in the beginning of my 30s. You have friends, you have colleagues. Like, what can you do? It's part of life. And when it happens, I always go to what's familiar to me. I know it's easy like to say, but when you think about it, you can also make your mistakes smaller. If you, let's say when I have like a really bad emotional day, which it happens maybe once in a lot of times, so like a lot of months. So I can decide, okay, that today my sin, will be a 90% cacao chocolate, like a lean chocolate. And then I know that that mistake, quote unquote, it wouldn't do me any harm. And then it's kind of like I'm giving my mind what it needed at the same moment, but it's not, I'm not paying with a 300, 400 milligram per deciliter, which are devastating.
It's interesting because, if you look at it, like a type 1 diabetic who you're forced to control how much insulin is being secreted or being utilized. I mean, it mimics what the pancreas would be expected to do. And, so people with an intact functioning pancreas with normal beta cell function, if you ate some carby food, you know there's going to be a huge insulin release from the pancreas. And then repeatedly over time, is that causing problems? We know that type 1 diabetics, for instance, that end up using more insulin, if they have a high insulin utilization, their rates for cancers go up significantly. So it's kind of, you wonder if the same thing is happening in normal people that don't have diabetes based on the very high levels of insulin that might be circulating. It's an interesting model, that you can do that and you can see those differences there. How much does exercise impact your glucose control, and how do you manage it? Because some people see, like, I know even with me, if I do a really high intense exercise, really hard workout, my blood glucose will go up. And I don't know what the situation for you is. And then, like a long, slow, kind of more steady, kind of medium pace, and it's going to go down. So how do you deal with exercise?
Cool. You checked it CGM? You put a...
Yes. I put a CGM for this month. My blood glucose right now is 97 for anybody's interested. But yeah, so it's one of those things that man, I woke up, I think it was 70, but yes, it's interesting. And I'm sure you have a CGM too, I'm imagining, I would guess. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Dexcom.
So the exercise impact. Yeah, the impact of exercise, the impact of exercise on your glycemic control and how you deal with that.
Yeah, and what you said about insulin, of course, when I changed to the diet, so I reduced from numbers like 60, 70, and 80 units a day. So I reduced that to 20, sometimes 15, that it's really like the physiological minimal doses that I can take in order to keep my blood sugar in balance. But exercise, I walk a lot with type 1 diabetics, and I know it for many years on myself that it almost all the time, every time is the same, that strength will, as you say, it will get a spike in the blood glucose. It will raise your blood glucose, and what they call aerobic, when you maintain a medium exercise for longer periods of time. So you will get a drop eventually in the blood glucose. And that's sometimes what, runners, they call it like the wall. I mean, non-diabetic runners, that they have this fall of energy in the middle of the run or of a race. So usually that's the hypoglycemic event that is happening.
So as far as, and I talked to, I had Dave Dykman, as you mentioned, on the other day, he was talking about his son, who's a type 1 diabetic, and he was mentioning that he still utilizes a rapid acting insulin, and he injected IM, which makes it even more rapid acting if there's a course correction. If he misses somehow and he's just like, oh, it's drifting up 110, 120, he's just going to pop it back down with some rapid. So do you do that as well?
Yeah, of course. I keep my Nova Rapid always. It's part of my set, as you said, as the the son, I think he's an athlete. I saw him in the group, like the son of Richard Dykman. So I'm doing the same. Yeah, I'm doing also intramuscular. Some when it's really like urgent and a bit higher than, let's say, 110, and I want to get it down as fast as I can. But also you can do, instead of intramuscular, you can just inject Novorapid and go for a walk of even like, let's say 10 minutes, like a rapid walk. For me, it does exactly the same as a intramuscular shot. It just, the insulin suddenly gets active, like immediately when you give the extra push of the workout.
Right. Yeah. It's just the blood flow picks up in that area for sure. So it's a reasonable strategy. So how much of your, I mean, because there'll be type 1 diabetics interested in this. And I think this is a common theme we're seeing, a lot of regular insulin to cover a low carb meal, particularly if it's a lot of protein and fat, rapid for some quick corrections, not very much, because probably the doses aren't, I mean, as a carb eating diabetic, it probably wasn't unusual for you to inject 10 or more units to cover a meal, maybe 20. And now for a rapid correction, it's probably, a couple of units, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, exactly. I don't think I get to any correction that is bigger, that is greater than 1.5. If you ask, because when you get my highs today, they're like 140, and it's extremely rare that I get over 140. And if it does, it's like it's maybe once in every 6 months, and then I can give some, even 3 units I can inject. But yeah, when I was a high carb eater in my days, that I was also a half marathoner, and there everyone around me was telling me, you have to carb load before a race, you have to carb load before a long run. So it was very common for me to inject even a 12 on a meal. And back then I was doing it kind of automatically, because when the blood sugar is really unbalanced, so you can't really identify what was the cause of the changes in your blood sugar. And then it's like it's a big storm, and there is no order. So I was just automatically sometimes for big meals just injecting 10, because I assumed that it works for every meal, but actually it doesn't. It's not, because you can't really know where it came from. And as soon as you start to reducing your carbs, and all of your system is getting more like relaxed, and then you can see, okay, the cause of the rise in the morning, that's because of the hormones of the morning. Now I know that. Now I know that this fruit, this one strawberry, can raise in a 15 milligram per deciliter in the blood, like the blood glucose, and so on and so on.
Well, let's talk about exercise, because you said competing as an athlete, and a lot of people will say, even some type 1 diabetics that are athletic, you've been able to still work out and train with minimal insulin and very little carbohydrates, even as a type 1 diabetic. Is that fair to say?
You mean as a low carb in a low carb diet?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. It gets more predictable, like everything with a low carb diet in diabetes. But I could, as I said, when I was 20 and I started a bit to be half marathoner and to get inside into the workout space and as a personal trainer, so my blood glucose did get better. It even also only because you're gonna test more your blood glucose, because before you work out, after, sometimes in the middle of the workout, so only that got my blood glucose better, but still it was like 6.2, 6.4, not anywhere close to for where I am today.
Well, has there any negatives to going low carb? Has there been like, my brain doesn't work because I don't have enough glucose, or I can't sleep, or my hormones have crashed, or my thyroid has stopped functioning? Well, these are some of the criticisms we often see around people going on prolonged low carb diets. Has any of that happened to you?
Yeah, actually it did. And I think the biggest subject here is the thyroid, if you ask me.
Yeah.
And a lot of type 1 diabetics, they have thyroid issues. So we might be we have a weakness in a way, but not a weakness, but a tendency for the thyroid to take the load, if you want to call it like that. And I think it has something to do with hypoglycemia that is long standing in the body. And we don't know enough today. And people talk a lot about evolutionary logic, but I don't think we had any point in evolution that you could just go to your fridge and get 500 grams of meat of your choice. So I would say that today we deal with things that they are beyond of our capacity sometimes, but for me, I saw my thyroid changes a lot, and as I said, I think it has to do with hypoglycemias also. That it shouldn't be long standing in the body, and as you go down to low carb, you get your blood glucose down, so you're starting to get into this game of like keeping it on a very tight range, and the body has a really delicate regulation of the blood glucose. Obviously, that's what I know from my life story. And you have to be really careful, I think, with hypoglycemias. And Dr. Bernstein talks about it also, actually, about the thyroid. And I know that he's telling his diabetics to check it. And I don't think it's only diabetics. I think that a lot of people that go to the low carb diets, they will experience that in one way or another, changes in the thyroid. And the thyroid is very complex. It's not like the pancreas in type 1 that it works and not working. There is a lot of stages to that. And it can only work half or 20%. So it's big. But yeah, I got into that rabbit hole one day.
So let me just to tease this out a little more. So when you went low carb, were you seeing significantly more hypoglycemic episodes? Were you like running into the 50s and 40s pretty commonly at low carb initially?
Yeah, especially in the transition period. And then I saw that you have to be really careful if you decide to do it. You have to know what you're doing. And I learned it on my own, but through trial and error. But that's what I think it gets the load on the thyroid. And the thyroid in the body is kind of like a reacting organ. It reacts to a lot of stress. It reacts to a lot of to malnutrition. It will react. It will change the activity, even if it's only it's for a period, not for your whole life, but still it changes a lot. And a lot of people don't know. And also today, the doctors, if you go to a maybe a everyday family doctor, so he will tell you that you need to get the hormonal replacement for the thyroid. But they don't check exactly what's the root cause of the thyroid to change now, if it's temporary or if it has a real damage for life. And that's big questions that everyone should investigate if they find the thyroid problems.
Yeah, fair enough. And there's certainly, if you have one autoimmune disease, you're very much prone to get another autoimmune disease. And a lot of people whose thyroid are having issues have, an autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's thyroiditis or Graves' disease, which is another one, Hashimoto's. But typically on the other end of the spectrum. So when you initially went low carb, you said your thyroid function was lower, perhaps, and then it bounced, and then it recovered later. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, it was my T3 was going downhill, as I saw, but it's hard to track those values in blood. That's what I discovered through this trial and error. Like sometimes there are peripheral hormones, and it's not that easy to track what actually your amounts now in the body. And today I told you that I work with functional doctors in my own journey and in the journey of the people I work with. And the functional doctors that I go and that I know very well, they are my friends also. So they will look at symptoms, which I think is huge in hormonal issues, especially in thyroid. And for me, I started to experience, like 1 year into my low carb journey, I started to experience brain fog and constipation, like quite seriously. And that's when I realized that my body is not functioning well. It doesn't have to be this way. I have to be much sharper. I have to be much more efficient than I were before. And suddenly I felt like I'm getting older. And that's what thyroid patients say that they feel. And when I started to investigate, so I saw that my body made some changes, and I had to go to a doctor that really, really knows what he's doing. And I had to also help my thyroid with a natural hormones replacement, which I highly recommend if someone is on thyroid to consider the natural option. And that helped me. But every step that I take in this journey that it never ends, I discover something new about that. And there is like a huge puzzle with the autoimmune issues that we don't really know. And many type 1 diabetics, they will never experience Hashimoto, but maybe they will experience celiac or Crohn disease, and it's big.
So you went on replacement hormone. Are you still on it? Do you still use a replacement for your thyroid?
I use it only as like on demand, when I need, and I look at the symptoms all the time. There is some days that I don't use it, but the real thing to understand about thyroid that if you start replacing, so you are also depressing your thyroid, and that's something that everyone should be aware, that if you start replacing, you're depressing, and then it means that you will be dependent on those hormones. And I had some times that I was winning off the hormones, and then I had some, it's not an easy times, but I've done that also. And the most important thing is just that you wouldn't have any lack of hormones in your body. If you have to take them in a replacement form, in pills, so do it. If you can awaken your thyroid in natural ways, do it. But never compromise on a half functioning thyroid, on even non-functional thyroid, because then you will suffer from severe symptoms, and we only live once, you shouldn't.
Yeah, and I think it's important you point out that you're symptomatic, because some people, and Steve Finney has pointed out that some people will naturally see a lower T3 on low carb, but they're asymptomatic and their TSH is normal, and there's a concept of thyroid receptor sensitivity and resistance. And so if your thyroid is more sensitive, perhaps you need a little bit less thyroid hormone. Just like if you're more insulin sensitive, you need less insulin. So that concept is still there. But if you're symptomatic and you're having hypothyroid symptoms, then you need to assess that and do what you need to do. Did you change your diet significantly after you had this sort of brain fog and lower functioning thyroid? Or did you continue on a low carb type of thing?
For some periods, I felt like my body was demanding more energy in any way. So I did actually. I quit coffee in that time. I decided, and ever since I never went back to coffee already for a couple of years. And I think that for me personally, I don't know if it's not something that I would recommend for each person, but for me, I felt like it done a lot good in that thyroid field. But I've done that, and for some periods of time, like it wasn't really all the time, but I did added carbs very precisely, like in the morning sometimes, that I felt like I really needed to get up, and it was just amazing for me how significant the thyroid is in every aspect in our life. It dictates temperature, it dictates your mood, it dictates if you will be depressed or not, it dictates your metabolism, your when you go to the toilet, how will be your stool, it's everything, if you are happy or not. So it's like a regulator of rhythm and heat in the body, and rhythm and heat, it's everything in life. So as soon as I understood that, it was a serious rabbit hole to dig in, and I think we still don't know enough about the thyroid type 1 diabetes connection.
Yeah, and clearly there's an association. Even in type 2 diabetes, there can be thyroid issues. I'll just leave it at that. So you said, you've been on this journey now for, at least in a low carb journey now for 5 years or so, something like that, 5 or 6 years sounds like. And you said you're continually adjusting and changing and learning things. What are some of the other things you've learned, about yourself or about this condition in general that, you can maybe share with some folks?
Yeah, ever since ever since I went low carb, I've changed a lot, and I know it's very individual, this disease, and but I know for me that it's a lot about your insulin sensitivity level. With the people I work and on myself, I know I was always insulin sensitive, and when I got to low carb, I got even more insulin sensitive, probably because a lot of toxins went out of my life, and I'm not eating processed food, and a lot of stuff, but my whole body now is balanced, so I'm very insulin sensitive. So it's really easy for me to add some low carb fruits, which I know many low carbers in the type 1 diabetes world wouldn't agree with me, but for me it works. Like I can do low carb fruits. I can do sometimes to get a bit more carbs per meal. I'm not counting my carbs every meal. I know that if I'm very insulin sensitive, and let's say I give you an example, I have a long day of meetings, and in diabetes, and also for everyone, if you have a long day of meetings and you walk from each meeting 15 minutes, 20 minutes, you have to hurry sometimes, you walk fast. So that's a workout. The body will not care if you are inside the gym or walk in a hurry to an appointment. So I know in this day that I can add some carbs, and some of them, sometimes it will be half of banana, and I feel completely fine. I don't have any symptoms. My blood glucose stay in range. I'm still very insulin sensitive. And even in that long day when I was very active, so every type 1 diabetic will know that in the night after you have to adjust some, maybe your insulin, or to take some more like protein or fat because to prepare to the night, because you will be much more insulin sensitive in that night, and you can experience some hypoglycemia. So I treat every day like there is like a units of time, like the unit of time that I was active, the unit of time of the night, and that's how I deal with it day by day.
Yeah, and then when you mentioned occasionally you'll have a little maybe piece of fruit or half a banana or something like that, and you tolerate it pretty well. Do you often include that with the meal to blunt any insulin response, glucose response rather, or is it standalone? Is it like I'm just going to have a quick little bit of fruit to keep me going, or is it usually like I'm having a meal and I'm gonna add some fruit to it? How does that typically, or do you do both?
Yeah, so it's really you have to use your to use logic a lot. I will do both. As I said, if I have this long day of meetings that I'm running all day, it feels like running for me, because I'm very active and I can see my blood glucose level dropping down quite fast in those days. So I know already in advance that I will take half of banana in the middle of it. And maybe if it goes to the afternoon, so I will take another half of banana. And many times also I will do it with the meal, because, if I eat now in a very active day, I eat a meal and I inject on it. So you can say that these 2 units of insulin or 3 units, they will be like 4 units because of the insulin sensitivity. So I'm aware of that. And I might inject the same and add some half banana or maybe fruit or strawberries, and that's fine for me. It doesn't give me any significant spike. And so I will do it with the meal, and then I will go out for the meetings, and then I know that the curve will be flattened. It's the same for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Bernstein calls it the law of small numbers. So small insulin doses means small blood excursions. And obviously when you're, injecting 12, 15, 20 units at a time on a high carb diet, you can overcorrect. And all of a sudden now your blood glucose is, you're laying on the floor sweating and starving and you're hypoglycemic. How often do you have hypoglycemic issues these days? And how do you avert those? Do you give yourself a little bit of glucose, or how do you deal with that?
A lot of your guys, they bringing up questions. Hypoglycemia. Yeah, I have, when you decide to be low carb, so you put yourself in that position that you get close to the line, no matter how you look at it. And then as I said, you have to know what you're doing. You have to be if you can say it, a professional in diabetes, and to know what you're doing. And so, yeah, but the sensation is adaptable. And I used to feel hypoglycemia back in the days when I was eating high carb, even if my blood glucose would drop from 180 to 120. So today it's decent. The sensations, they are adaptable. And today I can feel hypoglycemia maybe only if I'm 55, 60, but I gradually feel it when I go below 70. And 65, I already feel like a mild hypoglycemia, not something that you will see if you talk to me, but I will feel it. And then again, like the law of small numbers, it's a kind of a genius law, because again, I will correct it very easily, like 2 grams of carbs, maybe 4, and I'm back on track.
Yeah. So easy to kind of keep that in line there. Have you had any real negatives with doing this? I mean, you mentioned, you dealt with thyroid issues for a while, but has it generally been, well, you said you had some constipations. Well, I guess let me ask you this. What does your diet look like today? What does a typical day or week of food look like for you? You said you eat quite a bit of red meat, but what does your diet look like? How much, do you think about protein, fat, and carbohydrates in those terms? And how much food do you eat? How many times a day do you eat?
About the downside, I think you will know probably better than me with your community and I know it from the community here that I work with, that there is the problem that today you go against the mainstream, and that people should be aware about it sometimes. And you building this community, and that's amazing. So people can help each other, and that's better. But that may be a big challenge, and you have to be strong, of course. What do I eat today? It's I'm very red meat based, but I'm not restrictive in any way. If I go to a restaurant with friends, family, I will eat sea fish. It's not like I'm preaching for only red meat. I will eat fish. I can eat seafood. I eat a lot of eggs. I get them organically now from a friend of mine. So that's a big thing that I like. I consume a lot of eggs. If they're high quality, I will consume as much as I want, not the supermarket ones. And I just combine. If I have usually my meal, it's based on local beef, which that's the main portion. And then on the side, I might do even some yogurt with some blueberries for dessert, which I don't need dessert at all. It's not, I got disconnected from the dessert idea, but I will do it sometimes. I eat some pickles every now and then that I make. I don't buy anything that come in package. I don't have any processed food, not even 1 milligram in my food, unless I go to a restaurant and I don't know that it was on the pan. That's the only chance.
So there's some concern about protein, turning into sugar. I think some people think, it's protein through gluconeogenesis turns into sugar. And that's why some people see an increase in their blood glucose when more likely it's just a stimulation of glucagon, which breaks liver glycogen down and releases it into the bloodstream. Do you ever limit your protein in any way? Or are you ever hey, if I have too much protein in one meal, I'm going to see a blood glucose rise? Or how does protein impact your blood glucose?
That's an important thing to know for type 1 diabetics if they really want to do it. But also type 2, of course. Dr. Berenstein was calling it the Chinese restaurant effect. It's like when you really fill your stomach with food. So yeah, you have this glucagon reaction. In the beginning, in my transition phase to this diet, so I used to have a really accurate amount that I knew that if I pass, let's say, 300 grams, maybe 400 grams a meal of a red meat. So I knew that I will experience that. And it usually happens 1 to 2 hours after the meal. And then I see suddenly a rise in the blood glucose. And today I know that I never eat to get full. I don't do that at all. I eat when I'm happy with my meal, I finish and that's it. And if I have some meat left, it will be left in the fridge for the next meals. But if I do get, and it happens we're human beings. So I know to predict it, and I will know to inject ahead of that, like 1 hour after I finish this big meal. So I will inject. I know that 1.5 unit of Act Rapid of the regular insulin will do the job. Will keep it in range. So
that's in addition to the regular you've already given yourself. So you'll give you some regular insulin to cover what you think is going to be the meal, and then you'll also give some rapid acting prophylactically about an hour out to prevent that protein induced rise. Is that fair? Yeah.
Yeah. If I spotted it late, so I will take a rapid insulin. But if I know to predict it, so I can 1 hour after I finish the huge meal, I will anyway inject the regular insulin, and then you can say that I split the dose of that meal.
Okay. Well, Tomer, we are running out of time, unfortunately. Are you participating on social media? You said you do some work with other people, diabetics and whatnot. How do people go about and find you?
Yeah, actually, I'm very active in Israel. I'm soon clinical nutritionist, but I'm working a lot with type 1 diabetics. That's most of my day now. I'm helping them in the same journey. I'm on Instagram. I'm Tomer Pappe with double P, Pappe, and the same on Facebook, the same on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel that now I talk to you, but I have a podcast that I called it the Normal BG podcast, which that's the podcast that is dedicated to the English speakers. So if anyone wants, they can find that. And I had now Dr. Anthony Chafee on that, and also Brian Sanders. And I would be happy to have you also in the future.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. Sure, just let me know. I'll be happy to come on there and we chat. Okay, thank you so much, Tomer. Good luck, and thank you for doing this, by the way, and thanks for just sharing your experience, because this is so helpful for so many people, because we just treat horrible. We literally treat diabetes just completely backwards, in my view. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow. You guys have a great one. Take care now. Bye-bye, Tomer.